He always sat on the same park bench alone. Every morning at 7:15 a.m., without fail, the paint was chipped where his hands rested, worn smooth by years of the same routine. But that Tuesday morning, something changed. A stranger sat down beside him, looked him straight in the eyes and said 7 words that would shatter everything he thought he knew about his life. You've probably walked past someone like him 1,000 times. The quiet ones, the invisible ones, the ones who seem to carry entire worlds behind their eyes, but never speak them aloud. What if the most profound truths come from the people we never notice? For 43 years, Arthur Chen had followed the same path through Riverside Park, past the fountain where children threw pennies, around the oak tree that had grown crooked from decades of wind, to the bench that faced east where the morning sun would paint golden streaks across the pond. He never spoke to anyone, never fed the birds like the other regulars, just sat there with his thermos of black coffee and a leather journal he never opened. The joggers had theories about him. Some said he was a widower, others whispered he was a failed writer coming to the same spot where inspiration once struck. The dog walkers invented elaborate backstories. But no one ever asked, because asking would mean crossing that invisible line we all draw around strangers. You know that line, don't you? The one that keeps us scrolling through our phones while someone 2 feet away might hold the answer to everything we're searching for. But Eleanor didn't believe in lines. At 81, she had decided that social conventions were for people who had time to waste, and time was the one thing she couldn't afford to squander anymore. She sat down that morning with the confidence of someone who had lived through wars, buried husbands, raised children, and survived her own death twice on operating tables. Her silver hair caught the light like spun moonbeams. Her eyes held the kind of mischief that made you wonder what rules she'd broken in her youth. "You're waiting for someone who's never coming back," she said, just like that. No hello. No small talk about the weather. 7 words that cut through 43 years of silence like a scalpel through skin. Arthur's coffee cup trembled in his hands. How could she possibly know? He had never told anyone about Sarah. Never spoke her name aloud after that last phone call. The one where she said she was getting on a plane to Seattle and would call when she landed. That was 1981. The plane landed. Sarah never called. You carry ghosts differently when no one else can see them. They become heavier over time, pressing down on your shoulders until walking upright feels like defiance. Arthur had mastered the art of looking normal while drowning in broad daylight. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, but his voice cracked on the last word. Eleanor smiled, not with pity, but with the recognition of someone who had told the same lie in different words 1,000 times. She pulled out a photograph from her pocket, worn at the edges, faded like a memory you've handled too often. "This was my daughter," she said. "Rebecca." She was 23 in this picture, 24 when she disappeared. The girl in the photo had Eleanor's eyes, but with a wildness that suggested she wouldn't wait for life to find her. She looked like someone who would chase sunsets across continents, someone who would love recklessly and completely. Disappeared? Arthur found himself asking, despite his policy of never engaging with strangers. That's what the police said, what the reports concluded, what everyone accepted. But mothers know different truths than police reports, don't they? We know when our children are gone and when they're just lost. Do you understand the difference between gone and lost? One is final. The other is just a matter of time and searching. Eleanor tucked the photo back into her pocket with the care of someone handling stained glass. "I've been looking for 37 years, following threads, chasing shadows, learning that disappeared people leave patterns. They go to places that feel like home even when home is the last place they can return to. Why are you telling me this?" The question hung between them like morning mist over the pond. Eleanor turned to face him fully. Her eyes weren't mischievous anymore. They were oceans with depths that could swallow ships whole. "Because I found her," she said. "Last month. Living under a different name in Portland, running a small bookstore, happy, alive, with a family who loves her and no memory of the life she left behind." How do you reconcile finding someone who doesn't remember losing themselves? Arthur stared at Eleanor, trying to process what she was saying. His mind raced through possibilities, probabilities, the cruel mathematics of hope. "Amnesia?" he asked, though the word felt too small for what she was describing. Eleanor shook her head slowly. The doctors had terms for it: dissociative fugue. trauma response. Clinical words for what happens when a soul splits in half to survive. But I just call it life's way of giving second chances to people who couldn't live with their first one. You think you know what you would do if someone you lost came back. You imagine running embraces, tearful reunions, the orchestral swell of everything returning to how it was. But what if they came back as someone else entirely? What if the person you mourned was truly gone, replaced by a stranger wearing their face? Did you tell her? Arthur's voice was barely above a whisper. That's why I'm here, Eleanor said. Sitting on this bench, trying to decide if love means holding on or letting go, if truth is always kind or sometimes cruel. She reached into her bag and pulled out a second photograph, newer. Digital print on glossy paper, the same eyes but weathered by different storms. The same smile, but carved by different joys. Rebecca at 60, surrounded by grandchildren Eleanor had never met. She's happy, Eleanor continued, genuinely, radiantly happy. She loves her husband of 30 years, adores her children, runs book clubs for at-risk youth. She became everything she was meant to be, just not who she started as. What right do we have to shatter someone's peace with our need for closure? Arthur felt his chest tighten. 43 years of coming to this bench. 43 years of waiting for Sarah to walk down that path, to sit beside him, to explain why she never called. He had imagined 1,000 reasons. Another man. A new life. Fear. Anger. Anything but silence. You want to know if your Sarah might be out there, Eleanor said. It wasn't a question. Living another life. Happy without you. The truth of it hit him like cold water. All these years he had been grieving her death while fearing her life. The not knowing had become his identity. The waiting had become his purpose. How did you find her? He asked. Eleanor smiled sadly. I hired investigators, learned to use the internet, followed every Jane Doe story, checked every missing persons database, but in the end, I found her the way we find all lost things. By accident, by grace, by finally looking in places I never thought to search. She stood up, joints protesting with the honesty of age. I have a flight to catch to Portland. I've decided to have coffee at her bookstore, not to reveal myself, just to see her one more time, to hear her laugh, to watch her recommend books to strangers, to say goodbye properly. Is that what love looks like? Choosing their happiness over your need for resolution? Arthur watched Eleanor walk away, each step deliberate and heavy with decision. She paused at the oak tree, the crooked one that had learned to grow despite the wind. Her hand touched its bark briefly, like a blessing or a farewell. You make 1,000 choices in a day. Coffee or tea, highway or back roads, speak or stay silent, but some choices remake you entirely. They divide your life into before and after, leaving you stranded between who you were and who you'll become. That night, Arthur did something he hadn't done in decades. He opened the leather journal. The pages had yellowed at the edges, waiting. The first entry was dated March 15, 1981, Sarah's birthday, the last day he had heard her voice. She said she loved me, he had written. Said it 3 times, like she was trying to convince herself, or like she was saying goodbye. The entries that followed were a map of grief. Daily at first, then weekly, then monthly, as hope hardened into habit. He had documented everything, the calls to hospitals, the police reports, the private investigator who took his money and found nothing, the psychics who offered false comfort, the dreams where she explained everything only for him to wake up forgetting her words. But it was the blank pages that told the real story. Years of them. White spaces where life should have been. He had stopped writing when he realized he was authoring a ghost story. What do you do when your story stops in the middle of a sentence? Eleanor's words echoed. Disappeared people leave patterns. Arthur had never considered that Sarah might have left a trail, just one he couldn't see. He had been looking for someone running back to him, not someone running toward a different life entirely. He pulled out his phone. Technology had changed the mathematics of finding people. What once required detectives now needed only persistence and Wi-Fi. Social media had made everyone trackable, traceable, a collection of digital breadcrumbs leading back to lives they thought they'd left behind. But did he want to find her? The question surprised him with its honesty. 43 years of waiting, and he had never asked himself what he would do if the waiting ended. Would he be Arthur who loved Sarah? Or had he become Arthur who waited for Sarah? Was there a difference anymore? He typed her name into the search bar. Sarah Martinez. Too common. He added her birthday, her hometown, the college where they met. Nothing. He tried variations, nicknames, maiden names of friends she might have adopted. Each search was a small death, a door closing on possibility. Then he remembered something. A detail so small he had almost forgotten it. Sarah collected music boxes. Antique ones. She said they were like trapped songs waiting to be freed. It was such a specific passion, the kind that might follow someone even into a new life. He searched for music box collectors, forums, specialty shops. And there, on page 7 of results, he found it. A shop in Boulder, Colorado. Melody's Memory Box. The owner's bio was brief. M. Collins has been collecting and restoring antique music boxes for over 30 years. The photograph was careful to show only hands, delicate fingers winding a brass key. But Arthur knew those hands, had held them through college graduations and midnight fears and Sunday morning laziness. They were older now, marked by time and work, but unmistakably hers. Sarah, living as M. Collins in Boulder, surrounded by trapped songs finally free. Have you ever discovered that the answer you've been seeking was actually a question you weren't prepared to ask? Arthur stared at the screen until his eyes burned. M. Collins. Melody Collins. Of course she would choose a name that meant song. Sarah had always believed in the poetry of small details. He found himself laughing, then crying. Then both at once until a jogger stopped to ask if he needed help. How do you explain that you're mourning and celebrating the same discovery, that finding someone can feel exactly like losing them all over again? 3 days passed before he could look at the website again. This time he noticed things he'd missed. The shop's tagline, "Every song has a story. Every story deserves to be heard." The business hours that closed early on Tuesdays. Sarah had always volunteered at the library on Tuesday evenings, the note about donating restored music boxes to children's hospitals. She had built a life of small kindnesses, exactly as she always said she would. You think people change completely when they disappear, but we carry our essence like fingerprints. It shows up in our choices, our habits, the way we arrange our new lives to echo our old dreams. Arthur found a video tour of the shop. The camera was shaky, probably held by a customer, but there she was, moving in and out of frame. Her hair silver now, cut short and practical. Laugh lines where smooth skin used to be. But the way she handled the music boxes like they were sleeping butterflies, that was pure Sarah. This one, her voice said off camera, was made in Prague in 1898. It plays a waltz that no one has been able to identify. I like to think it was composed for a specific person, a song that belonged to only 2 people in the whole world. Arthur remembered the music box he had bought her for their 5th anniversary. Swiss-made with a dancing couple that spun to La Vie en Rose. She had cried when she opened it, said it was too beautiful, too perfect. He told her that was exactly why it belonged to her. Did she still have it? Or had she left it behind with everything else that belonged to the person she used to be? He realized he could find out. The shop's website had a section for custom restorations. People could send in their broken music boxes, and M. Collins would bring them back to life. It was perfect. He could send the music box, if he still had it, and see if she recognized it. Test the waters without diving in, but that felt like a trick, like something the old Arthur would do, the one who was afraid of disturbing the silence. Eleanor hadn't tricked her daughter. She had chosen to simply witness her happiness from afar. What's braver, knocking on a door or walking past it? Arthur made a decision. He would go to Boulder, not to confront or confess or demand explanations, just to see. To sit in a cafe across from her shop and watch her through the window, to observe the life she had chosen over the one they had planned, to say goodbye properly, as Eleanor had said. Because sometimes love means letting someone remain who they've become, even if it means you remain who you were without them. The flight to Denver took 3 hours and 37 minutes. Arthur counted every one. He had booked the ticket at 2 a.m. in that dangerous hour when courage feels like clarity. Now, at 30,000 feet, doubt crept in like fog through cracks. What right did he have to intrude on her peace? Sarah, Melody, had clearly chosen to erase their past. Who was he to resurrect it? You tell yourself stories about why people leave. They're the bandages you wrap around wounds that won't stop bleeding. Arthur had crafted hundreds. She met someone else. She was scared of commitment. She needed adventure he couldn't provide. But what if the truth was simpler and more complex? What if she just needed to not be herself anymore? The woman beside him on the plane was reading a book about second chances. The irony wasn't lost on him. He wondered if Eleanor had made it to Portland. If she was sitting in her daughter's bookstore right now, pretending to browse while memorizing every detail of a stranger who used to call her mom. Boulder appeared below like a promise. Mountains standing guard over possibilities. Arthur had never been here before. It seemed important that he was seeing Sarah's chosen city with fresh eyes, not through the lens of shared memories. The rental car smelled like artificial pine. He drove slowly, using GPS like a crutch. Melody's memory box was on Pearl Street, in the historic district. He parked 3 blocks away, close enough to walk, far enough to run. Have you ever stood at the edge of your own story, knowing the next step will rewrite everything that came before? The shop was smaller than it looked online. Nestled between a used bookstore and a pottery studio, the window display held music boxes of every size, some open to show their mechanical hearts. A sign in careful calligraphy read, "Closed for lunch, back at 2 p.m. Feel free to listen while you wait." And there was music. Faint but distinct, multiple melodies weaving together from the boxes in the window. It was chaotic and beautiful, like overlapping conversations in a language you almost understand. Arthur sat on a bench across the street, the same kind of watching he'd done for 43 years, but with intent now instead of habit. At 2:07 he saw movement inside. A figure turning the sign to "Open." His heart hammered so loud he was sure everyone could hear it. Then she appeared. Melody Collins. Sarah Martinez. The woman who had been both and neither. She was watering plants in the window boxes. Such a mundane task. He watched her check each leaf, adjusting stems toward the light. She had always been gentle with growing things. Said it was practice for everything else that needed tending. A customer entered. Through the glass, Arthur could see Sarah, Melody, light up. Her hands moved as she talked, conducting an invisible orchestra of enthusiasm. The customer laughed, pointed to something. Melody climbed a ladder to reach a high shelf, and Arthur's breath caught. She had always been afraid of heights. But there she was, confident and sure. People change. It's the one constant we can't accept. For 3 days, Arthur became a ghost haunting Pearl Street. He learned Melody's routines: coffee at 7:30 from the shop next door, oat milk latte with an extra shot, lunch at 1 quaus, always outside if weather permitted. She closed at 6. So sharp except Thursdays, when a music box repair class kept the lights on until 8 warbang. He watched her world expand. The elderly man who brought her cookies every Monday, the teenage girl who volunteered in exchange for restoration lessons, the golden retriever who knew to wait by the door for the treat Melody always had ready. She had woven herself into this community so completely it was impossible to see the seams. Do we fall in love with people or with the stories we tell about them? On the 4th day, everything changed. Arthur was at his usual bench when he saw Eleanor. She was sitting in the cafe directly across from the shop, a book open but unread. Her eyes were fixed on the same window he'd been watching. 2 strangers on the same pilgrimage circling the same questions. He crossed the street before he could think better of it. "You came," Eleanor said without looking up. "I wondered if you would. Did you go to Portland?" She nodded slowly. "Spent a week there. Bought 17 books I'll never read. Listened to her recommend poetry to a young man who reminded me of my grandson. Cried in the bathroom twice, left without saying a word. And?" Eleanor finally looked at him. Her eyes were red-rimmed but clear. "And I realized something. We don't love people for who they are. We love them for who we become when we're with them. My daughter, Rebecca, the one I raised, she made me a mother. But the woman in Portland, she doesn't need a mother anymore. She needs to stay exactly who she's become." They sat in silence, watching Melody help a small boy choose a music box for his grandmother. She knelt to his level, treated his budget of $7.32 as seriously as any collector's offer. When they found one within his range, a tiny box that played Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, she wrapped it like it was made of spun gold. "That's who she is now," Eleanor said softly. "Someone who makes magic affordable, who convinces people that broken things can sing again." Would knowing about her past add anything to that? Arthur thought about all the conversations he'd imagined having with Sarah. The accusations disguised as questions. The hurt dressed up as understanding. The demand for explanations that no explanation could satisfy. What would any of that accomplish except to steal the peace she'd fought so hard to find? "There's something I need to tell you," Eleanor continued. "About disappearing. About why some people need to become someone else." Eleanor's story came out in pieces like a puzzle she was solving as she spoke. Her daughter Rebecca had been brilliant. Full scholarship to Yale. Pre-med track. The perfect child who never caused worry until the day she did. "She called me from a payphone in Kansas," Eleanor said. 3 months after she disappeared, said she was sorry. Said she couldn't breathe in her own life anymore. Said every expectation felt like a stone in her pocket and she was drowning on dry land. You know that feeling, don't you? When the life everyone expects you to live starts to suffocate the life you need to live. I begged her to come home, promised we could fix everything, change everything. But she said something I'll never forget. "Mom, you can't fix a person who was never broken, just built for a different world than the one you made for me." Arthur felt the words like physical blows. How many times had Sarah tried to tell him she was suffocating? How many signs had he missed because he was too busy planning their future to notice her present? "The private investigator found her trail," Eleanor continued. "She'd been in a car accident in Nevada. Not serious, but enough to require hospitalization. When she woke up, she claimed she couldn't remember anything. No identification. No memory of who she was or where she'd been. Classic dissociative fugue, the doctor said. Except the investigator found something else. The day before the accident, she'd legally changed her name, opened a new bank account, created an entire paper trail for a new identity. She was planning her disappearance when the accident gave her a more complete escape than she'd ever imagined. The implications settled over Arthur like snow, silent, cold, transformative. "You think Sarah did the same thing? Planned to leave?" Eleanor shrugged. "I think sometimes the soul knows what it needs before the mind can accept it. Maybe your Sarah got on that plane to Seattle intending to call. Maybe she fully believed she would, but somewhere between takeoff and landing, she discovered she could be someone else, someone who didn't owe anyone her old self." Through the window, they watched Melody teaching her Thursday class. 6 students bent over music boxes, learning to replace springs and adjust timing. She moved between them like a conductor, offering encouragement, demonstrating techniques with infinite patience. "She's a teacher," Arthur said, more to himself than Eleanor. "She always wanted to teach. I told her there was no money in it, that she was too smart to waste her talents on other people's children." The shame of that memory burned. How many dreams had he dismissed as impractical? How many times had he confused love with control, support with steering? "We do terrible things thinking they're love," Eleanor said gently. "We cage people with our care, clip their wings while telling them they're free to fly. Then we're shocked when they find a way to escape. What's the difference between loving someone and loving your idea of them?" That night, Arthur dreamed of music boxes, thousands of them, all playing different songs at once. He was searching for one specific melody, the one from the Swiss box he'd given Sarah, but every time he got close, it morphed into something else. He woke with the certainty that some songs were meant to change. The next morning brought rain, not the gentle boulder drizzle locals claimed to love, but real rain. The kind that turned streets into rivers and made the mountains disappear. Arthur almost didn't go to Pearl Street, but habit is stronger than weather. Melody's shop was closed. A handwritten sign in the window read, "Gone to estate sale. Music boxes need rescuing. Back tomorrow." It was such a Sarah thing to write. She had always assigned feelings to inanimate objects, convinced that things could be lonely too. Eleanor wasn't at the cafe either. Arthur sat alone, watching rain river down windows, when his phone buzzed. A text from a number he didn't recognize. "It's Eleanor, I'm at the hospital, not for me, can you come? You know how tragedy shortcuts everything else? How crisis makes strangers into allies." Arthur found the hospital without thinking, guided by the same instinct that helps birds navigate storms. Eleanor was in the waiting room, looking every one of her 81 years. "It's Rebecca," she said. "My Rebecca, in Portland. Heart attack. They don't know if..." Her voice broke like glass. The math was cruel but simple. Eleanor could be there in 3 hours if she left now, but leaving meant abandoning her plan to let her daughter live in peace. Showing up at a hospital meant revealing everything. It meant choosing her need to be a mother over her daughter's need to not have one. "What do I do?" Eleanor asked. "What would you do?" Arthur thought about Sarah in her shop, surrounded by music boxes that played songs for people who weren't there to hear them. He thought about 43 years of sitting on a bench, watching life happen to other people. He thought about the difference between letting go and giving up. "I think," he said slowly, "that love means showing up, even when you're not invited, especially when you're not invited, because what if she needs you? What if she's been waiting for you as long as you've been waiting for her?" Eleanor grabbed his hands. Her fingers were ice cold, but her grip was steel. "Come with me," she said. "Please, I can't do this alone." How do you say no to someone who's about to risk everything for the possibility of reconciliation? They drove through the storm in Eleanor's rental car. She insisted on driving, said it gave her something to focus on besides the phone that wouldn't ring with updates. Arthur watched the speedometer climb and thought about velocity, how the faster you go toward something, the less time you have to decide if it's where you want to be. The hospital in Portland smelled like all hospitals, disinfectant fighting a losing battle against fear. Eleanor had gone silent during the last hour of the drive, retreating into whatever place we go when reality becomes too sharp to hold. They found Rebecca's room by following the sound of singing, soft, almost whispered, a lullaby in a language Arthur didn't recognize. Eleanor froze in the doorway, one hand pressed to her mouth. Rebecca was awake, pale as paper but awake, holding the hand of a woman who must have been her daughter. They had the same eyes, the same way of tilting their heads when they concentrated. 3 generations linked by genetics and separated by choices. You think reunions happen in a burst of recognition, but sometimes they happen in the space between breaths. Rebecca looked up, saw Eleanor, and time folded in on itself. For a moment her face cycled through confusion, recognition, and something that might have been relief. "I know you," Rebecca said softly. "From the bookstore. You bought all those poetry books." Eleanor nodded, unable to speak. She was crying without sound, tears running rivers down a face that had worn too many masks for too long. "You reminded me of someone," Rebecca continued. "Someone I dream about sometimes. A woman who sang that same lullaby in Portuguese, though I don't speak Portuguese." "You did," Eleanor whispered. "When you were small. Your father was Brazilian. You loved the sound of his language, said it tasted like music." The moment stretched like taffy. Rebecca's daughter looked between them, understanding dawning. "Vovó," she said, "grandmother." The word hung in the air like a bridge between worlds. What happened next was not the stuff of movies. No dramatic embraces, no orchestral swells. Just an old woman approaching a hospital bed with the careful steps of someone walking on holy ground. Just a daughter who had forgotten remembering the weight of her mother's hand. "I'm sorry," Rebecca said. "I don't remember you, not really, but sometimes in dreams I remember loving you." "Is that enough? Is the memory of love as real as love itself?" Eleanor took her daughter's hand. "That's more than enough," she said. "That's everything." Arthur watched from the doorway, witnessing something too private for strangers but too important to miss. This was what he'd been afraid of all along. Not that Sarah wouldn't remember him, but that she would remember loving him and choose to stay gone anyway. His phone buzzed. Email notification. He almost ignored it, but the sender caught his eye. Melody's memory box. He opened it with trembling fingers. "Dear customer, thank you for your inquiry about restoring a Swiss music box circa 1976. I would be happy to evaluate your piece. However, I should mention that I have a particular expertise with that model, as I once owned one exactly like it. If yours happens to play La Vie en Rose and has an inscription inside the lid, I would very much like to see it. Some songs never truly break, they just need the right hands to wind them again. Best regards, Monsieur Collins." The email changed everything and nothing. Arthur read it 17 times in the hospital corridor, while Eleanor's family, broken and mending, created new memories to overlay the missing ones. Each reading revealed new layers. Sarah remembered the music box, had kept enough of herself to recognize its description. But more than that, she was inviting him in, offering to restore more than just a mechanical song. "You spend your whole life preparing for the moment that will define you. Then it arrives dressed as an ordinary Tuesday. He left the hospital without goodbye. Eleanor would understand. She had her own reconciliation to navigate, her own careful dance between past and present. Arthur drove back to Boulder through clearing skies, the storm having washed the world clean for whatever came next. The music box was in his hotel room, wrapped in tissue paper like a relic. He had brought it without knowing why, the way we carry talismans against uncertainty. Now he unwrapped it slowly, reading the inscription he hadn't looked at in decades. For Sarah, who makes every day sound like music. Forever, Arthur, forever. What a presumptuous promise, as if we have any claim on tomorrow, much less eternity. He arrived at Melody's memory box at 7:15 the next morning. Habit, probably. Or poetry. The bench where he'd kept vigil was occupied by a homeless man feeding pigeons. Arthur stood awkwardly, holding a box containing 43 years of waiting. At 7:30, Melody appeared with her oat milk latte. She saw him immediately. No surprise crossed her face, just a small nod, as if she'd been expecting him all along. She unlocked the shop and held the door open. "You're early," she said. Her voice was exactly the same. How had he not recognized it in the video? "I've been late for 43 years, he replied. "Thought I'd try something different." She almost smiled. Almost. "Come in. Bring your ghost." The shop smelled like wood polish and time. Music boxes lined every surface, each one a story interrupted. Melody led him to a workshop in the back, where tools waited in precise rows and half-restored mechanisms lay like exposed hearts. "May I?" She held out her hands for the box. When he gave it to her, their fingers brushed. The contact was electric and ancient, familiar and foreign. She opened the box carefully as if diffusing a bomb. The melody started immediately, La Vie en Rose, in perfect time, as if it had been playing continuously in some parallel universe where they never stopped loving each other. "I remember buying this," she said softly. "No, that's not right. I remember someone else buying it, a girl who believed in forever. A girl who thought love was enough to build a life on, wasn't it?" She looked at him then, really looked, and in her eyes he saw Sarah fighting with Melody, the past wrestling with the present. "Love was never the problem, Arthur. I loved you so much it erased me. I became a mirror showing you what you wanted to see. And one day I looked for myself in that mirror and found nothing looking back. The truth of it hit like cold water. All those years, he'd been mourning his loss. Never once had he considered that she might have been mourning hers too. The loss of herself to the consumption of being who he needed. "I got on the plane to Seattle," Melody continued, winding the music box again, fully intending to call, to come back, to be the Sarah you loved. "But somewhere over the Rockies I realized I didn't know who that was anymore. I knew who you wanted me to be, who my parents expected me to be, who everyone had decided I should be. But I had no idea who I was underneath all those expectations. You think identity is fixed, solid as stone. But what if it's water, taking the shape of whatever contains it until it finds its own level? So I became nobody, changed my name at the courthouse, paid cash for a bus ticket to Denver, then Boulder. I chose Melody because music was the only thing that felt truly mine. Collins because it was anonymous. I built a life one small choice at a time, like restoring a music box gear by gear." Arthur watched her hands as she spoke, still graceful, still careful. "Were you happy?" he asked. "I was free," she said, which felt like happiness for a long time. Then it just felt like freedom. Then it felt like hiding. You can't run from yourself forever. Eventually, you realize you've been carrying what you're running from the whole time. She set the music box on the workbench between them. It continued playing, the dancing couple spinning in their eternal waltz. "I kept waiting for you to find me, for years. Every time the door chimed, I thought it might be you. Then I stopped thinking it. Then I stopped remembering why I was waiting." "I sat on the same bench for 43 years, Arthur said. "Every morning. Waiting for you to come back. I know." The simple acknowledgement broke something in him. "You know? I hired someone to check on you, once, about 10 years ago. He sent me a photo. You on that bench, feeding pigeons you don't even like. I cried for 3 days. Almost came back. But coming back would have meant becoming Sarah again, and I'd fought so hard to become Melody. Have you ever realized that the prison you're trying to escape might be the home someone else is trying to preserve? I'm sorry, Arthur said, for making you feel like you had to disappear to exist. I'm sorry too, Melody replied, for not being brave enough to tell you I was drowning, for choosing the cruelest kind of leaving. They stood in the workshop, two people who had loved each other into destruction and apart into survival. The music box played on, indifferent to their pain, faithful to its only purpose. What now? Arthur asked. Melody smiled, and for the first time it reached her eyes. Now you go home, you get off that bench, you stop waiting for a ghost. You learn who Arthur is when he's not defining himself by loss. And you? I keep being Melody. But maybe a Melody who doesn't flinch when someone calls her Sarah. Maybe a Melody who can integrate her past without being consumed by it. She picked up the music box and held it out to him. Take this. It belongs to your story, not mine. Keep it, Arthur said. Consider it a donation to your next restoration. Someone else's broken song that needs fixing. She accepted it with the gravity of someone receiving communion. They walked to the door together, navigating the narrow aisles between other people's memories. At the threshold, Melody touched his arm. That woman you were with, Eleanor. I heard what happened with her daughter, how they found each other without needing to return to who they were before. Maybe that's the real miracle, not going back, but meeting again as the people we've become. Arthur thought about Eleanor holding her daughter's hand in a Portland hospital. About Rebecca remembering love without remembering the lover. About the granddaughter who called her Vovo, building new bridges where old ones had burned. Maybe we could have coffee sometime, he said, not as Arthur and Sarah, but as two people who might like to know each other now. Melody considered this. I close at 6 on Tuesdays. It wasn't yes. It wasn't no. It was possibility, which was more than either of them had offered in 43 years. Arthur walked out into bolder morning light. The mountains stood witness to whatever came next. He didn't look back. For the first time since 1981, he didn't need to. The past was exactly where it belonged. Not forgotten, but finally forgiven. 3 blocks away, he passed the bench where he'd kept vigil. The homeless man was still there, surrounded by pigeons. Beautiful morning, the man said. Yes, Arthur agreed. It really is. He flew home that evening. Didn't take the morning flight because mornings, he realized, were for new things now, not for waiting. The plane lifted off as the sun set behind the Rockies, painting the sky in shades of ending and beginning. You think your story ends when you solve the mystery, when the waiting stops, when the questions find their answers. But that's where it really begins, in the space after the music box stops playing, when you have to decide what song comes next. Arthur never returned to the bench in Riverside Park. Joggers noticed. Dog walkers invented new theories. But the truth was simpler than any story they could create. He'd learned the difference between holding on and being held captive, between loving someone and loving the idea of them, between waiting for life and living it. 6 months later, he got an email, no subject line, just a photo of a restored music box in a shop window. The card beside it read, Swiss made, 1976. Plays La Vie en Rose. Previous owner learned to sing new songs. Price, 1 coffee, every other Tuesday. Some things break beyond repair. Others just need time, patience, and the courage to wind them differently. Arthur smiled, closed the email, and marked his calendar. Every other Tuesday. Not to reclaim the past, but to discover what harmony 2 changed people might create. Because love isn't about finding the person you lost. It's about seeing who they've become and choosing to know them again. It's about sitting on new benches in new cities with new stories to tell. And sometimes, just sometimes, it's about learning that the stranger beside you is exactly who they were meant to be all along. Like this video if you believe in second chances that don't try to recreate first ones. Subscribe if you understand that sometimes love means letting go, and sometimes it means holding space for who someone needs to become. Share your thoughts below about the transformations that saved you, the identities you've shed, the people you've become. This channel is for those who know that the most profound love stories aren't about staying the same. They're about growing so fully into yourself that you can finally see others for who they truly are. Not who you need them to be, not who they used to be, but who they are right now, in this moment, which is the only moment we ever really